everybody. I've got with me today Brother John Deputy. He is the past master of Point Isabel Lodge, number 33. Hello, John. How you doing today?
Doing great, Hank. How are you?
Pretty good. I've also got Chris Caddel with me today, and he is a newly raised Master Mason. And he came to us not long ago, and of course had to wait forever to become a Master Mason because of the whole COVID situation. But Chris, I wanted to start with you. I know that you came on board with us through an open house, I guess, and just wanted to talk a little bit about what your experiences were and how you feel about Masonry and what originally, besides curiosity, and if you had curiosity, specifically what that curiosity was, what led you to us? How did that happen?
Again, as you mentioned, the open house opened the doors. You know, that's what got me to go up to the lodge and talk with people, meet with people, and the stories and just the camaraderie that I saw that was there during the tour was something I wanted. You know, it was like, hey, this is pretty neat. I need to keep taking these steps, and just enjoyed going up there. Went up there for a couple months, just showing interest and talking to different people, and I call them my brothers now. At that point in time, it was just people that I'd met, but now they're brothers that I have for a lifetime, and it's honestly been great. It's been a good experience all the way around.
Well, that's great. I think you definitely went about it the right way. We have a lot of guys that come in and they immediately want a petition, and to me that's kind of the wrong way to do it, because it's almost like a marriage. You know, you got to find out if you fit, if we fit, and if it feels good for everybody. If it does, at that point you can, you know, start that petition process. But so I know that, you know, I guess you must have heard things about Masonry in your life before you became a Mason, maybe through the internet or through movies, or there had to be some original curiosity, I guess. Did you have family members that were Masons, or?
You know, I can't say. Yes, I have family that I have found out since I have joined the fraternity that were Masons that I had no idea were Masons.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
The first experience I had with the Masons was back. I grew up in a small town in the Northeast Panhandle, in the Texas Panhandle, and you always had the Kiva Shrine coming through, and you talking to people, how do you do it? How do you become a Shriner? Well, you got to be a Mason first. I'm like, oh. Worked at the police department at that point in time, and one of the officers there was going through the process of becoming a Mason and did his petition, and I was in college full time, getting ready, you know, to grow up and get a different job, and just didn't have time to pull it off, and I didn't know how much time it took. It just wasn't a priority then. So,
wow.
And since coming back and moving down here, and like I said, the social media open house that brought that feeling back around, and that's where I started taking the steps that I took to be where I'm at today.
Great. John, what about you? How did you become the great Mason that you are today?
Well, I had always been interested in Masonry, mainly because my grandfather was a Mason, my maternal grandfather. My father was not, but being a veteran of the Korean conflict, he belonged to his American Legion and another group called the 40 and 8. And he used to always tell me that it was important to have a group that you belonged to so that everywhere you went, you had a place to go. And for me, that was Masonry. I was working in Brownsville. My supervisor was a Mason, and he and I had talked about it, but I was getting married at the time, and I'd gotten a petition, but then I went back to him and I said, Tommy, you know, I'm going to be awful busy. I really don't think I have time right now. And I went to give him the petition back, and he says, you know, John, just hold on to that. He says, when you need it, you know, we'll be here for you. When you're ready, we'll be here. And then one evening after work, I and some of my coworkers were out, and we were having, you know, some dinner and enjoying a few adult beverages, and two of them looked at me and said, hey, we're thinking about joining the lodge. You want to join with us? I thought, that'd be great. So the three of us joined the lodge. But the reason really was to know that wherever my career took me or wherever life took me, I'd always have friends. And that has always weighed true. No matter where I've gone for work, I've always been able to find a lodge that I was welcome to attend.
Well, that's a cool concept. Yeah, I don't travel much, so I haven't been able to exercise that one, but I like that. And you know, I've heard that from a couple of people. So I guess you've had an opportunity to visit a bunch of different lodges then. Have they all been within or under the Texas umbrella, or have you?
No. When I was working in D.C., I attended lodges in Maryland and Virginia. I've attended lodge in Indiana. I've attended lodge in North Dakota and in Minnesota. And I find all jurisdictions are a little bit different, but they're all the same.
Right.
I also have attended lodge in Mexico, and it's still the same lodge. It's still the same brotherhood, you know, even though it's a different language. But it's lodge, you know, and it's, like I said, everywhere you go, you know, you're going to run into somebody,
Right.
you know, and they're going to talk to you just like they've known you their entire life. And I think that's what's special about Masonry. And whether it's Masonry or like I said, for my dad, it was the American Legion, I think it's important that we all have that, you know, that ability to be someplace and go find somebody who shares common beliefs that we share without just going out into the public and trying to find somebody, you know. Make the haystack a little bit smaller so when you go look for that needle, you can find it.
Yeah, because that can really be a hit or miss type thing out
Mhm.
in society. So Chris, you know, you had to wait out the COVID thing, and I don't know how many months it was, but it seemed like it was forever. And in that process, I mean, I know that you still had a lot of conversations with the brothers and kind of got together with people here and there, but did it dull that thirst to become a master mason at all, or did it enhance it? You know, I mean, I think it's interesting because I don't know too many people who have had to wait an extended period of time when they wanted to move forward. I mean, I know guys that waited because they had to go to work or life took over or something else happened, but not guys who were antsing to do it. You know what I mean? So I mean, I'm curious as to how, what you were thinking in that process. Were you thinking, man, this is going to take forever, or I don't care whether this happens or not, or you know what I mean? I mean, where were you with it?
It wasn't, I don't care if it happens or not. I'm just one of those people, when I finally commit to something, it's going to happen. It's if
Common thread with Masons, I think.
If I say I'm
Sooner or
going to
later,
get this
yeah.
done, it's going to get done. So there was never a thought of not finishing or not completing. Patience is probably the biggest thing that it took, and I have the fortunate, you know, my dad used to say, have the patience of an oyster. So, and it was just something that resonated, and it's just sitting there waiting it out. Just be patient. It's all good things come. So, and that's where I was at. Just it was out of my control, out of the lodge's control. Nobody could have changed anything about it.
Right.
The bond was still there, the communication was there, and it was. You know, the wait was probably actually not a bad thing. How bad do you want something? You know.
Right.
So I can't say the wait was. It was probably good. You know, when you think about it, and getting to that moment and just knowing, hey, this is going to happen, and then you get the date that it's going to happen, and you're like, hey, we're raising you, and you're like, all right, you know, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and you're like, and it just builds up your anticipation, and you go and you get there to lodge that night for your raising, and then, you know, what happens there, and it was special, and it just made it even better than what it probably would have been if I would have just bounced from one to the next.
Yeah.
So it definitely built up the excitement for me because it was in waiting for so much time.
Well, you know, I've been one who's always said that the fellowcraft mason's degree is too short. The time that a person spends as being a fellowcraft is, to me, too short. Because most guys, they become an apprentice, they go through that lengthy time to get the work done, they become a fellowcraft, boom, they snap it in and become a master. But there's so much in the fellowcraft. So did you take the time to sever the liberal arts and sciences and all that kind of stuff? I mean, did you take the time to study and all that? And
I did not, and one of the reasons I didn't is I'm I'm probably one of the few people. I didn't know a whole lot about masonry, and when I started coming up to lodge and talking to people, they're like, "Don't go read up on it. You know, you'll have a better experience if you just go through it." So I just went through it. So I didn't want to grab books or anything that was going to, you know, kind of spoil the riches of it.
Okay.
So no, but it was just more a time of sit and self-reflection and
Yeah.
what I had learned at that up to the fellowcraft point at that point in time, and just going back over it and actually staying up on the EA work and the fellowcraft work, just sitting there going back through that because there's not much else to do. Hurry up and wait.
Yeah, that's it.
So that's where I was at on that.
That's cool. So John, you know, you and I were talking a little bit before we started shooting and just kind of messing around, I guess, and talking about masonry. And I found some comments that you had that were pretty interesting. So I wanted to see if maybe you wanted to expand a little bit about, you know, your feelings about where masonry is in today's America and where we're going. I mean, since we're on that topic, let's see if we can kind of nail it down. I don't want to beat it to death, but I kind of want the listeners to get an idea of where we think we are, because I think if we're able to nail that down a little bit better, I think it'll help to just give masonry the added push that it needs, especially through this whole COVID crisis that we're facing, and see if maybe we can give people a better understanding of where we are, where we think we are, and where we're going. So talk to me about that.
Yeah, Hank, I firmly believe that the principles of masonry still are as valid today as they were over 200 years ago. And I think that there are still people wanting to learn those principles and follow those principles. Because I believe all good people have those principles in them. It's just, have they brought them out to the surface, and how often do they practice those principles? You know, we're all tempted to go astray. But what masonry does is it brings us back in, because you know somebody's looking over your shoulder and somebody's whispering good counsel in your ear, or you have somebody you can go to when you're getting ready to make a decision and you think, I'm teetering here, and I can go to one of my brothers and say, hey, what do you think about this? Have you encountered this before? So I think masonry definitely has a place in our society. But I think the challenge we have is we've been kind of sitting back on our laurels saying, oh, look how big we are. Because after World War II, you had everybody coming out of the military who was used to being part of something bigger, and they were looking to be part of something bigger. So they joined. And then that went into the Korean conflict. And you had people join there. Like I mentioned, my dad with the American Legion. You know, everybody coming out went right and joined the American Legion. So there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it was coming from that being part of something bigger. I want to continue that. You know, I hear that from veterans today from Iraq and Afghanistan that say the thing they miss about the military is that feeling of being part of something bigger than themselves. So I think we can offer that to people. But the other challenge we have is time. You know, we only have so much time on this earth. And nowadays we're competing with the fact that jobs now, our workforce now, is no longer sunrise to sundown. It's now a 24/7 workforce. We have families where both parents are working. So if one parent's working, the other parent's got to be taking care of kids. We're competing with more media than there's ever been in the history of the world. You know, between TV, streaming, podcasts, books. You know, yes, there are still some people who read books. I mean, so there's this massive drain on everybody's time. So how does masonry find time or get into somebody's time to where it's important enough for that man to come to lodge, whether it's twice a month or 3 times a month or whatever it is? What am I getting out of going to lodge? And I'll be honest with you, when we first had COVID and we weren't having dinner at lodge, and all we did was open lodge, pay the bills, and go home, it was a waste of my time. Time that I could have spent doing something else. So I think as Masons, we need to be cognizant of the fact that the one thing we all have is time, but time's also precious. So when we bring members into the lodge, we need to make sure that we're making good use of their time. When Chris comes to lodge, when I come to lodge, when you come to lodge, we need something there that's making good use of your time, you know. And for us at Sam B. Crawford, one of the best things we have is dinner. Not that the food's that good. I mean, the food's adequate. But it's the time we spend together as
Right.
brothers. Not even talking masonry. Just talking about, you know, well, so-and-so's tractor broke down and he had to fix this part, but, you know, and I'm sitting there going, you know, I don't own a tractor, but maybe someday I'll have a problem with a motor that's similar to that, and I'll learn from that.
Right.
But the other night I attended another lodge, and I won't name the lodge I was at, but I got there, I walked into the building, walked past an office where there were 4 people standing talking. They saw me walk by. Nobody asked me what I was doing. Nobody asked me if I needed anything. I thought, what if I was here to do them harm? Nobody paid any attention to me walking in. Walked into the kitchen or into the dining area, and the steward said, "Hey, how you doing?" I said, "Oh, I'm fine." You know, he didn't ask why I was there. I've never been in that lodge, so they can't assume I'm a member. And then, you know, so we finally got around to introducing myself, you know, and going through everything I needed to go through. And after the meeting, one of the members came up to me and says, "You know, we know how to do it right here." We were in and out of that meeting in was probably 40 minutes. And I was thinking, no, that's not doing it right. Because I drove an hour to get here. And if all we're going to do is pay bills, why am I coming? You know, so I think that's the challenge. We are facing challenges in membership, but all organizations are. So I feel, and this is probably off where you wanted me to take this, but the way we're going to fight that is by making sure we make good use of our members' time.
I like it. That's really, really a good and I hadn't even considered that, and I, of all people, I think should have. But yeah, that's a valid point, you know. And yeah, I'm glad that we're back to having dinners again. I missed it too. It was really strange just going to lodge, opening, doing business, and closing. That was a little too weird. So I'm hoping that the dinner thing will continue with this new resurgence that we're having. But you know, and that the other aspect to that is, do you know of anything that you can think of off the top of your head besides dinner that would make a better use of a man's time while he's at lodge but not doing lodge business? I mean, have you had some things that you did at other lodges that were just completely enjoyable that you like doing?
Well, you know, we talk about education.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. The one thing they did have at that lodge meeting the other night was one of the gentlemen, brothers, stood up and read an article that he had about Masonic education. You know, and it basically was chastising us for not having Masonic education in our lodge. And I got to thinking about it at that time. I thought, you know, we have all these books that talk about the principle of Masonry. I mean, we can go back to Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike if we wanted to and read about why is this important? What is the symbolism of the beehive? What is the symbolism of the hourglass, which is actually my favorite symbol in Masonry is the hourglass. And why is it important? You know, most Masons can't tell you that because we don't talk about it at lodge. Because we're in such a hurry to get lodge over with so people can go do something else. When it should be the opposite. We're giving you something that makes this hour and a half, however long it ends up being, very valuable to you as a Master Mason, so you'll come to lodge. And through that education process is what we can make more valuable, you know. And then there's other things, you know, you can, Sam B is very successful in their family programs, you know, Thanksgiving, Christmas functions, you know, that stuff. The more we get the family involved, the easier it is for men to come to lodge, because then now their family knows what it's about. You know, if the wives don't know anything about Masonry, then they're just going to believe what they hear.
Right.
And the only thing they know is their husband leaves and comes back, and they don't know what he's doing. You know, if the families are involved in Masonry, then it's a lot easier for the fathers, the husbands, you know, to be involved. We had it the other day, our new EA. I don't know if the young lady with him was his girlfriend or his wife.
I think it
But he
was
brought her to
live, yeah.
dinner. You know,
Yeah, that was great.
either way, she was somehow significant to him and he wanted to share that with her. That's a good thing. You know, I always think, you know, Stephen Hitt, you know, he's there. He adds a spark to the place. He's the son of a master mason. You know, just having family around helps. And I think we have this, like I said, we have this wealth of masonry that we talk about. Like you were just talking about the fellowcraft degree. You know, there's no reason we couldn't discuss the symbolism in the fellowcraft degree as long as we're in the right lodge to discuss it.
Right.
And we always hear, you know, well, this is an important degree, you know, we should all really go back and learn more about it, but we don't. You know, now the trick is how much? Is it 15 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? You know, I don't think if we start having hour-long lectures in lodge, people are going to be that thrilled about it because they're used to the meetings we have right now. But if we're going to keep members coming, we have to always keep in mind that for the new members we're competing with, all those things I mentioned before, work, family, other media, other activities, school activities, you know, kid activities, whether it's Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever.
Right.
So we got to make sure we make that time worthwhile. Now I have seen lodges do polls of the members where they did a survey and said, you know, what would you like to see in your lodge? But that really needs to happen by the person who's going to be master 2 years from now or 3, you know, so they have time, whatever that number is, so they have time to prepare. And then the challenge becomes implementing that plan. You know, Point Isabel Lodge, where I was the master, actually started out as a coffee club because it was an idea of some Masons that said, you know, we have all these winter visitors coming down to the valley and we could have a coffee club and we can get together, and it doesn't have to be talks about, you know, things that only Masons can talk about. We can talk about Masonry in general or the history of Masonry, you know, stuff you can talk about in public. So it started out as that. And then somewhere along the way, they started looking at each other and saying, hey, you know, we got enough people, we could actually open a lodge. Well, then they found out that the Point Isabel Lodge had actually been chartered at the beginning of the Mexican-American War. But by the time the paperwork got back from Grand Lodge, the Army had moved on. So for whatever reason, they never reassigned that number. So they were able to go to Grand Lodge and get that number.
Wow.
and then create the lodge. So, you know, that just grew out of a desire of a bunch of Masons who were getting together, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, we ought to start a lodge. So it meant enough to those gentlemen who did that to spend their time working on that. And that's really what we need to concentrate on, like Chris here, making sure that when he comes to lodge, because you have, what, 4 kids and a wife?
You have 4 kids?
So he is leaving.
Okay. I didn't know that. I'm sorry.
He's leaving. Wow. He's leaving his work behind. He's leaving his family behind. He's leaving whatever other friends he has behind to come spend 2 hours, hour and a half, 2.5 hours, whatever it is, with us. So we owe it to him to make sure it's worth his time. Because if it's not worth his time, guess what?
Yeah, he'll be gone.
He'll be gone. You know. And that's a tough decision that's made by all young Master Masons, you know. We have a few that we've raised recently. I haven't seen them in a while. I still talk to them. Mm-hmm. And I say, hey, I haven't seen you in lodge. Like, well, yeah, you know, my boy's playing Pee Wee football and it's on the same night. Well, that's going to be more important than coming to lodge. But we know somewhere down the road, he's going to have time to come to lodge. But even then, when he has time to come to lodge, we still have to go back to what I said, make sure it's worth his time. And that's what I think is how we can keep Masonry relevant in society is by making sure it's worth everybody's time to come to lodge, so they want to come to lodge.
That's a real good assessment. So I guess it's worked out for you so far. You felt like it's worth your time.
So far, it's been worth my time. John hit something with the education that I've been wondering and curious about. Yeah, you learn the degrees, you learn the work, and as you're going, the symbolism's explained, and it's just, I know there's so much more out there in regards to it. Since I've been raised to master, I actually got some books from the secretary, and I've read 3 of them so far, and I've learned no disrespect on anything or towards anybody, but I've learned more out of those 3 books in regards to some of the symbolism of Masonry and the principles of Masonry than I have from the lodge. I've learned fellowship and good friends and great brothers at the lodge. Wouldn't trade it for anything. But there is something being said, what John pointed out is, I think you need to make it a little bit more, you need to take some time to make it worth the time to go, and 10 or 15 minutes of Masonic education in there, like the secretary does on occasion when he throws the talking points out. I enjoy those. When he breaks out the rules and he quizzes the junior warden. I enjoy that. It's comical, but educational at the same time.
Yeah, but it also feeds the soul a little bit, I think.
It does, and Masonry takes a good man and makes him better. And the way you make somebody better is you keep feeding them the right things. And I think the Masonic education needs to come into play. And I can't remember if it was you or John said the amount of time that you dedicate towards it. And with the lodge, and I'm new. I don't know how long, I don't know what the practices is. I don't know if you go into lodge, you pay bills, and then, we're done. That's been kind of the practice so far. So changing the mindset of the members and getting them excited about the talking points if they're against it, or if they just want to go eat, go into lodge and leave, or break it in, do a 10-minute session, and then after a while just gradually increase it without anybody knowing it. If it's good content and it's growing the soul, then nobody's going to matter.
Right.
Nobody's going to mind.
And it's been hit and miss at Sam B, at least as long as I've been there, 10 years. I can remember almost every master having at least 2 or 3 sessions where we did some Masonic education. But, I agree. I think it needs to be a little bit more consistent. Maybe we ought to consider doing 10 or 15 minutes at every meeting. The strange thing about it is, the way that the meetings are structured, it's like we have a whole lot of work to do, or we're just paying the bills. And you almost don't know that until you get there, and so it's almost hard sometimes to fit the Masonic education in. A good example is, we just did our golden trowel ceremony last Tuesday, was it? Mm-hmm. And we had a whole lot to do, and there was a slot for Masonic education, and we just passed over it because we knew we were going to have a long night. So that's held over till the next meeting. And, it's interesting because when I first became a Mason 10 years ago, there was a table in the back where an office now stands. And everybody used to come to lodge early, way before dinner, 5:30, because we have dinner at 6:30. 5:30, 5 o'clock, everybody'd show up, and we'd all sit at that back table and just basically shoot the shit. We talk about topics ranging from Vietnam, because that seemed to be a really popular topic for some reason. I guess the guys that were sitting around the table were all ex-Vietnam vets, but we talk about Vietnam, we talk about guns, we talk about Masonry, we talk about politics, and those were the best times that I can remember in my Masonic edifice. I just had a great time talking to those guys. I looked forward to it. I would have gone every night if I could have. So it was a way valuable use of my time. Well, we moved that table, and we built an office where that area is now. And it didn't ruin my experience, but it did water it down. And so I see where you guys are coming from, and it makes sense to me. And so it's something I'm going to be thinking about to see if we can enhance and build upon that. But it's just not only us, too. I mean, other lodges should be considering the same thing as well. I mean, you can't just go in and pay the bills and leave. What's the point in going? So there's got to be something else. There's got to be, the whole family. And I think it should be a conglomerate of all of it. You need the family element. You need the educational element. You need the camaraderie element. And, you just need it all. And I think that's what will make Masonry a competitive product in today's wacky, freaked out world that we lived in, where everything is just bombarding you all the time. So Chris, let me ask you this. I mean, you've been real active in Lodge so far. And I've always kind of believed that Masonry is a calling too. You know, so I mean, like, for some guys, they come in, they do their thing, they're gone. I know a lot of guys who did all their work, became Master Masons, turned it in, and you see those guys maybe once or twice a year. That's it. So the fact that you're active in Lodge, it makes me feel good to know that there's, because you're a young guy. You know, it makes me feel good to know that there's young guys who are coming in still, and they're interested, and they're able to go. So let me ask you this. Do you have any plans? Do you want to do the Scottish Rite or the York Rite? Do you want to become a Shriner? Do you want to learn the floor work? Or do you just want to hang out? I mean, what do you, and maybe you haven't even considered it yet because you've only been a master for about a month. But just checking. I mean, where's your mind at right now? You know?
Mind at right now, speaking with the brothers and not asking about any of those the appendant bodies that go along with the Blue Lodge. They've all gave sound counsel, and it's learn something. You know, this is your home. You know, everything else is a branch off the Blue Lodge.
Right.
So, you know, don't be in a rush to go become in the Scottish Rite or go be a Shriner. Learn here, and then if that's something you want to do later, do that. As mentioned, got a wife and 4 kids. My time's limited. I want to spend it where I feel like I'm getting something, and being active in the lodge is something I want to do. It's something I enjoy doing. I'm more of a background type of guy, you know, putting up the fence, pouring concrete, stuff, you know, not where I'm center stage. I'm not that person, I don't believe. So I like helping and serving, and that's where I get my fulfillment out of the lodge. Going there, listening to the stories, and like he was talking at the round table at the back, I enjoy listening to people talk. That may not be pure Masonic education, but it is education that
Sure.
You're not going to get from somewhere else, and it's, you can take the principles from it if there is any, or it's just a good story. You know, you walk away and you learn something that day.
So have you found any one single quality that you can pull out and say, you know, the interesting thing is every guy that I've met that's a Mason has this one single quality?
No, I
No?
don't got it for you.
Well, okay. What about you, John? Have you found a single quality? I mean, because I
Trust.
know that we're all individuals who think alike. We all have the same ideas about life, about mortality, about religion. Maybe not so much about politics, but about most things, I think that we're all like-minded. So there must be a single quality that we all possess. And I'm not sure if I've ever been able to finger it or not, so I was curious as to whether you have that.
I think it's I'm going to struggle to put my finger on the right word for it, but it's just brotherhood. Knowing that we all share a common obligation, you know. Trust is a very big part of it. You know, I was a very young Mason, Master Mason. Probably, I may have been a Master Mason for a year. And it was Christmas time at the lodge, and we were having dinner, and there were several people from other lodges down, and a brother who is now a past Grand Master was sitting across from me with his wife and my wife and I, and having just a very nice conversation. Like I said, you know, like we've known each other all our lives. And as periodically comes up, every few years, you know, there's people propose changes either in the Blue Lodge or they propose changes in the Shrine. And the big one that year was doing away with the requirement to be a Master Mason to be a Shriner. And I, you know, said, well, you know, the Shrine's pretty big on its own. Maybe they don't need, you know, they don't need the Blue Lodges. You know, they can go on their own. And this gentleman looked at me and he said, if they do that, I'll quit. And I said, why is that? He says, well, John, coming up in January, we're going to have the Grand Master's Banquet. And the Grand Master Banquet in the Rio Grande Valley is always at that time was a big deal. Dinner on Friday night, big conference on Saturday, followed by a dinner that evening in Mexico. But usually the wives would go over to Progresso back when it was still safe to go do their shopping. And Mike says, we were thinking about asking you if you would be willing to go with the wives when they go over to go shopping. I was like, of course I'll do that. He says, well, here's the difference between us and the Kiwanis and the Lions Club, who are good organizations. When we send our wives with you, wherever it may be, we know that they are safe because we have an obligation we took to each other. No other organization has that obligation. So I think that's what our brotherhood is built on, is the fact that we have that common obligation. And we all know that we think the same when it comes to that obligation. And so when you say, what's the one trait everybody has in Masonry? It's the brotherhood that's founded on a solid foundation. And that's the way I see it. Like I said, I've visited a lot of lodges who don't know me from Adam. But as soon as I walk in the door and introduce myself, I'm home.
Yeah.
I think I shared with you, you weren't in the lodge at the time, I shared with all the brothers how at home I felt the first day I walked into Sam B. I knew Frank, Lynn, and I knew Robert Birchfield because I had met him through Frank, but I really didn't know a lot of people there. And as soon as I walked in, everybody was like, you would have thought I had been there. I was a long lost brother who hadn't been there, rather than a brother who was just coming in.
Right.
And that's the way it's been just about every Masonic lodge I've gone into.
Yeah. Have you had an opportunity to visit any other lodges yet?
No, I haven't gone out and visited any other lodges.
Wow.
I just, it comes back to time.
Yeah, there you go.
And I utilize the time that I'm allotted by the boss to the best that I can.
Yeah,
So.
I understand that. Yeah, I really wish I would have visited a lot more lodges than I have. I've been to 2 or 3, that's it. But it's always been an interesting experience to see the differences. And they're not really differences, they're more nuances than anything else. Each lodge has its own personality, I guess you could say.
Have you gone to Grand Lodge?
I have not. No.
Okay. Are you planning on going this year?
I'm not going to go this year, but I'm eventually going to go.
Yeah. I think Grand Lodge is something every Master Mason should go to, whether they're a past master or not. I started going to Grand Lodge when I had probably only been a Mason for a year or two, and it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in my life. You go to Grand Lodge, you have Masons from all over the state. Actually, you have Masons from all over the country, and there might even be a visitor from elsewhere, because Grand Lodge have representatives to other Grand Lodges.
Right.
And the camaraderie there is just, beyond reproach. It's just, and I've gone to Grand Lodge, and then I'll miss a few years, and then I'll go to Grand Lodge. And it seems like I run into somebody who I haven't seen for 6, 7 years, and like, hey, how you doing? And I think when you go before you're a past master or before you're an officer in the lodge, you're not concerned about the business of Grand Lodge. You're just sitting back and observing what's going on.
Right.
And it's very interesting to just sit and observe. And in the Grand Lodge, in the entryway there's all these benches wrapped all the way around. And you'll see people just sitting there, watching the world go by, and pretty soon somebody will sit down and talk to them that they've known for years, or maybe they just like me, ran into me at Grand Lodge one year, and and you sit down and talk to them. So I think that's very important. And I was really surprised when I came to Sam B, and I was talking to the master, the master at the time, saying, "You gonna go to Grand Lodge?" No, so and so's our proxy. And I thought, man, that's for the master to not go to the Grand Lodge convocation. To me, I don't understand it, because you are the lodge. You're representing the lodge. And I know for whatever reason you might not be able to go, and that's fine. But I think every Master Mason should go to Grand Lodge. Now we all know that if you're not one of the 3 principal officers, or you're not a past master, you don't have a vote.
Right.
But I think the experience of going to Grand Lodge is well worth the time and the effort, especially since we live relatively close. You know, it takes us 2.5, 3 hours to get to
Couple hours,
Waco. You know, you could drive up on Friday or on Saturday and go in and sit. Of course, this year's going to be a little different with the COVID and everything.
Mhm.
Although this year,
I
actually,
think it's virtual, isn't it? this
well,
year?
you have options. You can go or you can do it virtually.
Wow.
And I think the option to do virtual might even bring in some more people, you know, because, you know, if you're going to go to Grand Lodge, you know, it opens on Thursday, but there's really no business till Friday. So a lot of people travel up Thursday, spend the night Friday, and then they spend the night Saturday morning. The business wraps up, then they head home on Saturday. So there's the cost of all that and everything. With it being virtual, I would hope that would bring in more Master Masons who
Yeah, I
maybe
would
they
think
don't
so.
want to go to Grand Lodge. They, you know, they don't want to physically travel to Grand Lodge, but they want to see what goes on.
Mhm.
You know, and I'm not sure if this year a non-past master can do it virtually. I didn't look at that part, but I just think it's very important for people to attend Grand Lodge. You know, one of my favorite things I love to do is to walk into a lodge where some old past masters complaining about something Grand Lodge did. Well, Grand Lodge did this and Grand Lodge did that. Da 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 da. And I look at him, I say, "Excuse me, brother, aren't you a past master?" "Well, yes, I am. I was past master of Sam B. Crawford, whatever year or whatever lodge. You know, you want to insert there." And I look at him, I say, "Well, as a past master, you are a member of Grand Lodge.
Right.
So why did you do that?"
Yeah, there you go.
"Well, I wasn't there when they voted on." "Well, then don't
Should've gone.
complain." You know, and that, you know, just because you're a past master doesn't mean your duty to the craft ends. You are now a member of the Grand Lodge.
Right.
You have a duty to go. And like I said, there's always going to be reasons people can't make it. You know, a lot of years I can't make it because of work or whatever.
Right.
But still, if you can, you should be there. And you should take part in it. Because Grand Lodge doesn't, you know, everybody talks about the Grand Master's the head of all Masons, but without the Grand Lodge, the Grand Master can't do anything.
Right.
You know, they kind of oversee everything. It's just like being Master of the Lodge. You know, don't you feel like being the Master of the Lodge is like herding cats?
It's to me, for me at least, it's nerve wracking. That's it. It's just nerve wracking. So.
Yeah. You know, I tell everybody.
I never saw myself in the East, even on my way to the East. When I tried to visualize it, I couldn't. And then, of course, COVID hit, and that changed the dynamics of pretty much everything that's going on. So it's been an odd year. I mean, it's you know, I think it's gonna probably I'll finish out my year with it still being odd. But yeah, it's just been a nerve-wracking experience.
But it's the members of the lodge that make the lodge successful.
That's true. That's true. And the guys who continue to come back and be involved. So I'm not going to let this thing end without talking about COVID. And for two reasons. The first one is you know, the country's going through another resurgence again. It's supposed to be worse than the first. I don't watch the news a lot. I'm a busy guy. But I've been hearing it. And it's affected the way we do things in Lodge. And, of course, it's affected the way we do things in life. So, you know, without, again, beating it to death, you know, we're talking about the state of Masonry in today's America. I'm starting to wonder now if COVID won't be a permanent thing for us. It almost seems like this could be a permanent deal, you know, at least drag on for the next few years. Because from what I've been told, once you're infected, you don't have complete immunity. You can get reinfected again. So, I mean, what's to stop that wheel from, you know, just continuing? But I guess that the question that I have is, what do you guys think? Do you think that there's anything that COVID has brought about that even if it did go away, would still be a permanent fixture within Masonry? I mean, do you think social distancing has just become something that, because I remember, you know, there used to be so many guys that just, we stood in a small circle and you know, there was no social distancing or anything like that. You know, now we've got the whole mask thing, and that's difficult to deal with. I'm not a great mask wearer. I'm not comfortable with it. I believe it works. I believe it has a purpose, but it just doesn't feel good. You know what I mean? I don't think, I'm a 57-year-old guy, I can't get used to it. Just can't. And then there's some other aspects of life and of masonry that have changed just due to COVID. We got guys that aren't coming anymore, we're gonna lose them, you know, forever. And so, I mean, Chris, what do you think? You think there's gonna be stuff that just sticks around even after COVID's long gone? I mean, has it changed the core of masonry, I guess? Not really the core, but has it just changed the way we operate?
Yes and no. I don't think it's changed masonry a whole lot because masonry essentially shut down.
Yeah.
So there wasn't much change going on. It was just stopped. You know, the brothers communicated with each other outside of lodge, but lodge itself was just closed. We aren't, you know, masonry is a family, and the way I look at it, you choose to be around your family, and you accept those risks.
Yeah.
COVID's not going away. The flu's never gone away. They've never found a suitable vaccine for the flu, so
Right.
it's hit and miss every year. COVID, it's a strain of the cold, and it's not going to go away. They're not going to find a perfect vaccine for it because it mutates. It's here.
Yeah, so no herd immunity for it either.
You know, people were going to, you know, the human body is a miraculous thing. It's gonna take care of itself. It's just gonna take a little bit of time in order for that to happen. So we'll see how we adapt to it because it's here. It ain't going away.
Wow.
And as for the lodge and masonry, as where we're going now, yeah, we're social distancing, and there's brothers that aren't coming to lodge. I really enjoyed this last. The Golden Trowel Award that was handed out, and we had, you know, several brothers that were there that hadn't been there in a long time. I don't know, I know I'm not, but I don't know all the brothers, and I don't know if we're reaching out and saying, hey, you know, come back, keep in contact. I'm sure there's somebody that's doing it. I feel I'm not one of them that is doing it. So, but I think it's just going to be, is it worth the risk to you to be around family?
Yeah.
You know, and I think it is. Everybody else is entitled to their own opinion.
There you go. John, what do you think?
I think, like you said, is it worth the risk to go? It's just like, is it worth the time to go? You know, so there's a lot we can do to make it worth the risk, worth the time. One thing we do is reduce the risk, which is our implementation of social distancing, you know, those things we've done.
Right.
We haven't looked into sanitizing the lodge more, but maybe that's where we need to go someday. I know there's ways to do it that aren't that expensive to do, that we may want to look at doing. So we can reduce the risk as much as possible to make that risk more reasonable for people to take. My biggest concern is going to lodge is a habit. Just like going to church on Sunday is a habit, you know. And this was told to me, once again, when I was a brand new Mason by a Mason who would come down in the winter time and come to lodge with us. And he told me, he says, if you are not at work on lodge night and you don't have something that you have to do with your family, then you need to be at lodge. It was that plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I worked night shifts, I worked a midnight shift, I worked a day shift, but it rotated. So there were times I was at work, I couldn't make it to lodge. Or there was a time I had a function, you know, with the family that I had to be at. But other than that, he made it perfectly clear my butt needed to be in lodge if I didn't have one of those precluding things going on. Because once you get out of the habit of going to lodge, then it's hard to get back into that habit, you know. So that's my biggest fear when we weren't meeting was people are going to get out of the habit of coming to lodge. And I think we've seen that. We've seen, you know, some members who were there fairly regular before, since COVID, we haven't seen them. Now, what I don't know is it because they got out of the habit, or is it because the risk is still too high for them? which it could very well be. And that risk is what you deem acceptable, what Chris deems is acceptable, and what I deem as acceptable are three different things.
Right.
Absolutely.
You know, and if there's a brother that feels they can't come to lodge because the risk is too high, then I think we need to, in visiting with them, find out, well, what could we change that would be doable, that might make them more comfortable. And some people, you know, given the average age of some of our members, they're just, until there's a vaccine, they're not going to be able to come.
Yeah, and I think it's high time to start having those conversations with the members, you know. I mean, we really need to find out where we are on that. And I think making those phone calls and reaching out is going to be the way to go. Well, guys, I appreciate you taking time with me to do this today. It's been good. And every time I get together in Masons, I learn something. I'll learn something today, and that's, you know, time's valuable. And I knew it was there before, but I hadn't really considered it as much. So I appreciate that. And I didn't know you had 4 kids. Wow, you're a hard worker. So, but guys, it's been great. I appreciate it, and I look forward to having you both on again in another couple of months. So I'm going to make rotations. I think we're going to do a few more of these with this same topic, and once I feel like we've kicked this horse till we kicked it in half, then we'll move on to another one. But John, thanks a bunch for coming out. Chris, good to see you guys.
Pleasure.
That's it. We out. All right.